Item 8A, budget amendment to capital improvement plan. Sheriff Wickersham.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Before you is a budget amendment plan and also seeking approval to enter into an agreement with Partners and Architect. Just way of history, we started this venture back in 2014 when we hired consultants to do a jail feasibility study and criminal justice analysis. 2016, we received the report. Reviewing the report, there were many recommendations in that report on the whole criminal justice system as a whole here in Macomb County. But I looked at two key features that really me as sheriff had some control over, and I picked on those two to move forward when dealing with prisoners at the Macomb County Jail. And one was developing a central intake. Building a central intake, we can do some early screening, do some stabilization, look at referrals and diversions of inmates, and also identifying those that are addicted and or have mental health issues. The other aspect that I think we can do is we can develop a more robust pretrial screening process with our community corrections, and then dealing with prisoners that are coming in on the front end and assessing them and determine who needs to stay in jail and who doesn't. Last year we put out an RFP, and we had 4 companies that responded to that RFP. The objectives of that RFP, it was an architectural and engineering service RFP. We were looking for concept designs, schematic designs. We're looking to create a safe and humane environment in the county jail. We're looking at industry standards. We're looking to get a new mental health medical facility. And again, develop some programs to hold the addicted and the mental health individuals, and ultimately reduce recidivism here in Macomb County so that once they leave the jail, they don't come back. 4 companies responded to the RFP. We did 2 days worth of interviews, 2 a day. Our interview team consisted of myself, my chief of staff, John Roberts, my captain, Walt Zimney, our consultant that's been working with us for this project since 2014, Jim Robertson. We had Barb Caskey from Community Corrections, Steve Adair from the Finance, our chairman Bob Smith sat on the interview panel, our panel. Commissioner Carabelli was there for 2 of the presentations. Lynn sat on the panel, and we also had 2 judges, Judge Shepard from 41A District Court and Judge Kathy Viviano from the Circuit Court. After the interviews, each of these 4 vendors put together what we believed were strong teams in not only the architectural, the design, but some of the program type teams. And one of the things that we decided to do is each one was interviewed, and at the end of the interview, we asked them for a fee schedule that was sealed in an envelope so that when we picked the best team for this project, we did not know who was the high bidder, who was the low bidder, or even what the bids were. When we were doing the interviews and we wanted to select this team, we wanted the best team for Macomb County. And at the end of the process, the team, it was unanimous that Partners and Architect, and here today is the principal, Mike Malone, if you have any questions. We picked Partners and Architect, and when we opened up the fee schedule, they were the lowest out of the other 3 bidders.
Before I proceed, I need a motion on this. Have a motion. Commissioner Lucido, supported by Commissioner Sauger. Okay. Discussion.
The only thing else I would say is they put together a very, very strong team of national experts as it relates to the criminal justice system, to the courts, to mental health, and we do look forward of working with their team. The one thing that we really felt strongly about their presentation and the team that they put together is they have some innovative ideas. We didn't tell them and through this whole project, I don't want to tell somebody what to do. I want somebody to come back and tell me that this is the best way that we should be dealing with it, and this is how we can get here. And PIA rose to the top. So I would ask for your support.
Thank you. Twist of this thing. Commissioner Gillette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this question may be more to our Chair Smith or the rest of the board, because this issue obviously predates my election, looking at what we're going to do about in making our jail bringing our jail up to date and so forth. And I'm not sure what commitments the county has made so far, or final decisions the county has made so far as to what we're going to do about the jail in general. I mean, we heard the presentation last year, and there was some debate: do we need a new jail? And no, we don't need a new jail, and we just need revisions. Have we, as a county, and forgive me if I missed this, made a decision as to how much we're going to spend and what we're going to do to solve our problem moving forward? So whether it's Chair Smith or Chair Wickersham.
Yeah, no,
Chair Wickersham.
let me take that one, Commissioner. If you look at the history and what we've done over the last 5 years, we've spent about $15 million in renovating the current campus and the jail, putting money into the 1950s and 1960s. My belief, my team's belief, and even the study has said that the money in the tower, which is 840 beds that we put, that tower is going to get us another 25, 30 years. So that's 840 good beds that we need. The older sections, the 1950s, the 60s, the 70s, they're old, they're outdated, they're indirect supervision, a lot more liability, there's more industry standards. Direct supervision is kind of the direction to go. So part of this proposal that we put out would be some type of demolition of those older sections and stand up a new central intake, which was part of the proposal, and increase a better mental health.
So do the county then agree to a budget for the jail renovation, or do we or agree to a I guess you could say a specific plan yet at this point?
Well, this would be the second part. Really, the first part of it is to get this PIA involved and to give us a good hard look into the facility, how we could reach our goals and what's the best way to reach the goals, and come up with a solid dollar sign along with the staffing, at which point I would come back to this body and ask for approval. We have not committed to anything at this point.
Okay, so this stage is the stage where you are putting together a more concrete plan that you would then come back before the county and look for approval of that particular plan.
That's the ultimate goal, is to come back in front of this body at some point when the study is done and come back with solutions and come back with a hard dollar sign to figure out how we're going to get there.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that you are putting together a path to getting where we need to go. I just want to be a little bit aware as commissioners that we, that we know what what kind of path we're heading down, what kind of cost there's going to be. I'd hate to see us, a year from now coming back and saying, well, here's what this study recommends, and we haven't really come up with a way of how we're going to pay for what's being recommended or anything along those lines, and yet we've already committed, $1.2 million to developing the proposal. I just hope that, I hope that we're not putting a couple $1 million into something that we haven't fully committed to yet, or figured out how we're going to pay for yet. And so that, and then a year from now we come back and say, well, we just can't throw away that money, and then we end up like the Wayne County Jail situation, not nearly that bad. But, we've already sunk a bunch of money into a bunch of proposals and plans, but we end up not really having come up with a proposal how to pay for it. So I guess that's just my thoughts and concerns. I not have any specifically concern about this particular entity. I just hope that we are prepared to put a couple $1 million essentially into something that we don't know how we're going to pay for and what the end result is really going to be at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To echo Commissioner Drollet, I agree. This is going to cost some money. And to find out what you need, you have to spend money. So to digress just a little bit, I participated in the one day of the interviews, and I was quite impressed with the different ideas that the other firms had came up with. And I'm sure the sheriff and his team were listening to the different ideas, not that we would ever poach somebody else's ideas and incorporate them into something that we would do. But you take those best practices from all over the United States, the world, and you try to implement them what you have. And Lynn's sitting in the back of the room, and at the end of the day, I can say in the last 10 years, it's probably been close to about $22 million we've put into that jail as Band-Aids, strictly Band-Aids. And I wanted to say it was a $29 million package we put together, trying to get in on the infrastructure when the program was going to come out, and the money didn't go to that. So there's major issues that have to be taken care of. Me personally, I'm a guy, if you don't replace it brand new, you're going to have problems down the road on something, where you tear it down, go to a new site and build new. That's just me personally, not that I'm right. After talking to a couple of different experts, it's probably about $60 million more to do it my way. But I also try to look at the bigger picture at 20,000 feet down the road. What is the best way to do it? I don't know that answer. So to find out what needs to be done over there, he has to go through this process of hiring an architect to come up with what needs to be done to do that research on the facility itself. Put the schematics together, see what this is going to cost before he comes back and says, hey, and don't hold me to any numbers. I need $150 million to do this to the jail, or I need $200 million for a new one, whatever those numbers may be. He can't tell you anything until he spends the upfront money to do that research. No one's going to do that for free. Unless somebody does want to do it for free, I'm all in too. So the whole process of this is really driven of, now you do your real research, what can be salvaged, what has to be rebuilt, what can be taken into account. Where the sheriff had mentioned about diversion, there was a lot of discussion about other programs that they don't have to go to the actual jail. They go to these other treatment programs. I don't know all the different names of them all. So that whole process, yes, it's going to cost money. I don't like it. I understand it. I appreciate him coming forward. This is something that's going to come forward. In the meantime, start doing a little soul searching. Is this something, we're going to look at going out to a vote to the people? Is this something we're looking at bond internally? This is a pretty big project, probably the biggest one this county is going to see in a long time, or will see in a long time. And this is one thing by law we are required to have as a jail.
Thank you, Commissioner.
So let me finish. So with that said, we need to talk about now with, if the finance director can come up and explain to us, combination of the last item that came here of $800 and some thousand. Now we're a total of $2,066,500 that has to be paid for. And neither of these items were budgeted. So my question is, that we're going to need to have answered, is where did we leave off at the $13 million that was left in the capital project fund? How much money is allocated that is going to be spent, and how much money needs to go in there from the general fund? Did you get a chance to take a look at that yet?
No, not yet. I'm working on that. You asked for it by Wednesday. My hope was to have it done for this afternoon. Didn't get there, but my answers are the same as they were Thursday. So this item was not in the capital plan, as you correctly pointed out. We're coming now in conjunction with the contract to be kind of proactive. The $13 million is essentially all spoken for. You asked for that list. I'm working on it. So we're just trying to get out in front of this, because we'll need this $1.2 million. We'll need the $800,000 for the jail bunks.
$2,066,500.
Yep. And we will need, for the most part, all of the $7 million that we originally put in the 2018 budget. So.
Well, you're saying put in the budget, but this wasn't budgeted for, so this changes
Right, we'll
everything.
need the $7 million, the $13 million, and the $2 million for these two items.
Okay, so are we gonna be able to get all that by Wednesday to have a good understanding of where this is gonna be for us to make a decision?
I am confident I can get there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Carabelli. Commissioner Smith. No, excuse me, Commissioner Leonetti, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sheriff, good to see you. If I could have Mr. Malone come up, just a couple questions to Mr. Malone. Thanks. I'm not going to vet you because I know the sheriff's vetted you already. I just have a couple questions. I note that you're located in Mount Clemens, your principal office. How long have you been in Mount Clemens?
13 years.
Okay. I'm also looking at, I think it's on our thing, it's like a final exhibit A. You have like some basic services that you utilize. Most of them are Michigan, but some of them are out state. Is there a reason for that? Like there's a hardware installer that's like in Virginia. Is there a reason?
Yeah, I can explain. We have a diverse team of professionals, experts in this type of work. So we've recruited the best people we could find in the entire country, to be honest with you.
Okay.
We have a large firm out of New York.
I saw that.
Who's designed over 500 jails across the country and other countries. We have a programming consultant also in New York who's done about 200 of these types of facilities and has a specialty in medical and mental health. And the hardware consultant is one that they typically use, but he's an expert in correctional type hardware, and that's a very small piece of our project, but it's a necessity that we couldn't find here locally.
Okay, fair enough. Last question is in regard to the certificate of liability insurance. I note that the policy went into effect on February 15th, 2018. Was this something that after you got the bid that you had to
No,
procure?
that's our yearly renewal date.
Okay.
Is February 15th. Yeah.
Okay, so you renew every year, and here I see that you've named the holder Macomb County as it relates to your insurance for this particular project.
We put the language that was required in the RFP and the
Gotcha.
certificate. Yes.
Okay. Have nothing further. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chairman Smith.
Thank you. A couple of things. To Commissioner Drolette's point about, what are we going to do? We haven't committed this money. And it's a thought that needs to be brought out because if I'm not mistaken, and Jim and Tony and Lynn, you guys, we did a study, not to this depth, but a jail study quite some year, maybe 15, 20 years ago that we paid for and really didn't really use, right? So there is some, some merit in questioning and making sure that we're going to, as a board, as a sheriff department, as the executives are going to, move forward with this. But I don't, the problem obviously comes to where are we getting the funding from, and where are we going to? Are we millage? Is it going to be bond? We certainly aren't going to be doing out of general fund. So those are questions that need to be addressed. However, I'll get part of this. I think is driven, or at least seem to tie in really well with the indigent defense program that the state has mandated, where early intervention with attorneys on criminals or arrestees.
First appearances, yes.
Mental health options earlier than 30 days after they've been sitting in jail, realizing that these people probably should be somewhere else. So I think that this kind of ties right in, and we see that from these groups that have been up or that came to us that they're doing a lot of this all around the country. I don't know if we're catching up or we're kind of in the early stages of it, but we've really seen some. Well, one of the things I noted during the interview process was at least one of the companies, and I think it was even more than that, noticed almost a 50% reduction in jail beds being full with this type of early intervention program. So where there are costs involved, there are some implied savings down the line with less criminals actually being behind bars and less tax dollars paying for them. So, and you can get more of that, I think, from probably Partners in Architecture. I think they might have had that statistic. I'm not sure. I know a few of the groups did, where they've done so many of these in the past that they were able to show a significant savings on the other side of things too. So that's just for the future, for your taxpayers when the time comes. This was a pretty incredible group, I have to say. And Commissioner Carabelli was there the first day, and there was a couple groups that went the first day, and I remember him saying, well, there's no one going to beat these two. And then Partners in Architecture came in the next day, and quite honestly, amazingly, because the first two groups were very good, even, put it above, gave us a new level, in which to look at this from. And they did go from all across the country. Most of these groups brought in experts. So it wasn't Partners in Architecture and the local groups they normally work with to build a building here. It was They reached out all across the country, brought the best of the best in, as did most of really all of the groups that came in here. So it was a very interesting process. I think it was handled very well, and it was very fortunate that the group that everybody picked unanimously as the best also had the lowest bid. I'm sure they were second thinking, you know, that bid after that. I'm just kidding. But we appreciate it, and you guys had a fantastic program. I hope that the rest goes as well.
Thank you.
Oh, Sheriff, I'm sorry, one more thing. And I understand why, because this was an interesting bid process, but the bid quotes are supposed to be included in these. So if you could get a copy of all of the quotes for us from all the different groups. I know it wasn't a low bid type of thing, but just so that we have it
All
in our
four?
records. All four, please.
You'll have them.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Commissioner Romano.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Sheriff. Nice
Good
to have you
afternoon,
here. Thank you. You know, I'm always about the money. I don't, maybe it's that Italian upbringing in me, but I'm always about the money. You know, and it's refreshing to see that not only did they unanimously agree upon this company, as Chair Smith said, but theirs was the least cost proposal of the three bids coming in. So we got the best and the lowest cost proposal, which I think is something to be said. And in response to Commissioner Drolette's, and I agree, it's a lot of money to come up with for a study that maybe we don't use today. It's a study that we can build a foundation on if we want to use it shortly tomorrow, being whatever year that might be. But it's something that we can see in front of us. Personally, I think, I'm not an architect, that's a lot of money. But if it's something that we can use in the future and don't have to go through again, maybe just do some housekeeping on it, I think we're getting a big bang for our buck, and I appreciate the committee's work on this. That's all I have. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Romano. Commissioner Sauger.
Yeah, Sheriff, I'm just curious, two things. What's the population? Are we close to overfilling right now?
We're right under, we have 1,200 and I think it's 18 rated design capacity. We're right about 1180, 1190.
It's getting close.
It's getting close.
Okay, my other question is, I always was curious, and there's so much of it going on with drugs, how much of your population do you feel are drug-related?
I always use around 73% are incarcerated because they use drugs, sell drugs, commit crimes while under the influence of drugs.
You'd think they'd get back to the old crimes again, instead of drugs.
Drugs, yep.
Okay.
It's amazing, yeah.
Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you. Commissioner Gillette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I recognize that we have a need at the jail, and I appreciate the sheriff taking the time out to walk me through the facility and explain what the needs are. And I appreciate the good work that the committee did. And I have no doubt in my mind that this is a good firm, and it was vetted very carefully and so forth. I just a little bit befuddled by the process, where we've got a request coming to us for almost $2 million that wasn't even considered at the time of the budget for some odd reason. It wasn't even thought that this could be an issue. And we're moving down a path that we didn't create a budget for the path. We didn't create a determination like, okay, we as a county are willing to spend up to X to address the jail issue, and we're going to finance it through Y. And then now we're going to create a path to get there. Instead, we're walking down the path without knowing what the destination is with enough certainty from the way I look at it. You know, we're again, this is probably an excellent firm with the best possible bid, and it was vetted very carefully, and it addresses a need. Yet we, as a county, have not made a determination of what we are willing to do and how we're willing to pay for it. So I just wish that that was taking place at some point, that we had come together with a plan to how we're going to deal with our jail issue, how we're going to fund the jail issue, and then started walking toward that result, as opposed to walking down this path hoping we end up with a plan at some point and figure out a way to pay for it at some point. So that's just my concern, but nothing specific to the sheriff or this firm. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you. Couple real quick things. Sheriff, if once approved or if approved and finance director can find the funds, what's the process time-wise? Do we have a guesstimation of what? 1, 2 years?
Well, we're looking, this project has probably a 4 to 6 month window. So we'd be looking at maybe the fall to come back. We would have the hard numbers. If not the fall, right after the first of the year. And again, depending on which route we go as far as funding. If it has to go out, we're talking probably sometime in 19. I would think we probably wouldn't have a shovel in the ground till 2020. And then, again, I'm not the construction expert, but I think probably a 3-year project.
Okay. On that note, and I appreciate that, leads into the next thing. We're not going to know what this comes in, sort of where Commissioner Drollet was talking about. We don't know how to budget because we don't know what it's going to come in at. Not knowing into this process what these bids were going to come in until we sat down, so it's kind of hard to put a budget on it. My question is to be proactive. I guess this would go along with the executive's office and finance. Would this be something simultaneously in the process of the design for us to look at the opportunities for which direction the county would like to go? So when it does come time, we have an option of A, B, and C, depending on what the dollar figures are, so that we can kind of get an idea of saying, okay, are we going to go out for a proposal? Are we going to try to fund this ourselves? What's our capability under the cap? This is something where, again, I don't want to wait 6 months for your process to come back in the fall, then we take another 6 months to figure out how we're going to pay for it. I'd rather kind of simultaneously parallel. I know we don't know the number, but we can get a guesstimate within a ballpark. Is that something that we can do at the same time?
If I may, from the back row, I think there's going to be a series of presentations along the way as this project evolves. It's far too important. It's going to cost a lot of money, and this commission will be brought along every step of the way. Okay. It's not about building what we're comfortable spending.
No.
It's about building what we need, and then determining the cost and see where we go from there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Carabelli. Commissioner Myjack.
Thank you
on
to
the
Sheriff
first round.
Thanks to Sheriff Wickersham or the architecture. Do you guys have any inkling where we're going to be on cost? I know it's early. Are we talking, I mean, I've heard numbers in the past, 80 million, I've heard 200 million, and
Well,
I'm not qualified
sure.
at all to come up with a number at all,
You know,
like that.
Again, only off the top of my head, and then I'll use something that we can use in comparison. You know, we're thinking between 150 and maybe 200 million. But I can tell you, we back in 2005 came in front of this commission, and I think the price tag at that point, and it wasn't the exact same, but it was for some demolition and for a new tower, was around 92 million.
And that's a big range. Well, I guess the costs go up, right, from 92 million. How long ago was that, 10 years?
2005.
2005, okay. Okay. And can I ask a question through the chair to Mr. Schmiegel, if we can? If a number like that came out, where are we going to get that money from as a department director of finance? 150 to 200 million, the only two options I can think of, correct me if I'm wrong,
Let him answer
is
the question.
some type of bonding or proposal to the voters, if you will.
Yeah, we would most certainly have to go to the vote of the people to get a bond,
Okay,
a millage to pay for the bonds. We'll have to bond for it.
okay.
Another thing to keep in mind, we don't know where this will ultimately go. I would certainly think that if we do go to a vote of the people, we get the millage, we build the jail, that the schematic design cost would be eligible bond issue costs that would be reimbursed to the general fund if that were to happen. But to answer your direct question, we'd have to have a millage.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I'm not finished. I will cautiously right now support this, but very hard for me just because when you look at the public sector, it's about scarce resources. We have limited tax revenue for projects, and we did support a project just last month, a resolution that we urge more funding for roads instead of the RTA. And I know that has nothing to do with the jail, but there are limited funds out there, and that's just where I'm coming across, Sheriff Wickersham. I mean, I can look at would we rather bond or have a tax proposal for 200 million in roads or 200 million for a jail project? It's very difficult and very hard. So that's what's on my mind going forward, but I will cautiously support this right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Majak. Commissioner Dujay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been listening to some of the repartee going back and forth here. I agree with Commissioner Romano. I don't want to spend money that we don't have buying things we don't need to impress people we don't like. Period. That being said, we've talked about the jail for 10 plus years. And the question was, do we knock the thing down or do we build a new one? And if I'm not mistaken, 10 years ago, the question was, do we knock it down? And I think the cost was in around $90 to $100 million. Now we are in 2018. This isn't going to get started until 2020. This is a study to how much it's going to cost without knocking the whole place down. In 2008 or 9, we spent in around $3 million, correct me if I'm wrong, to redo the kitchen. Mm-hmm. Because we were given bag lunches, and that was costing us more than doing the kitchen routine. I think this is a good idea to get final numbers. We don't know what it's going to cost us, but we do know we need it. This has been a question on everybody's mind for years. Come on. If somebody's surprised by this, then maybe you don't subscribe to the Macomb Daily. But that being said, we need the jail. We're going to end up bonding for it because they're really, this isn't going to come out of petty cash or out of somebody's department. So that being said, finding out what the real numbers are, will it be between 150 to 200 million? That's probably realistic. But let's get the real numbers once they get into it, dig into it, and see if we can get a better deal someplace else. That being said, I support this. I think it's a good idea, and it's been a long time coming. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Leonetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just be brief. I mean, most of us recall there was a study here about 2-3 months ago where the gentleman came forward and said, look, there's about 9 different things you need to do. And the top 3 things was, number 1 was dealing with pretrial services. And if I recall the sheriff being here 3 months ago, we talked about this wing at the jail that's going to, as he indicated here today, it's going to deal with the mental health issues, the people who have addiction problems. And the idea is that we have services initially to free us so that we don't fill up our beds to capacity. So I agree with what you're saying, Commissioner Drollet. I agree with Jack that there's limited funds. Nobody wants to spend the money. But this is one of those cases where we have to spend a little bit of money to save money, unfortunately, and that's just the way it's got to be. So I do support it. I'm looking forward to seeing the designs. I know, as Deputy Executive Delden said, this is going to be incremental, so it's not like we're committed to one certain plan at this point going forward. But do keep in mind that study that came forward gave us 3 top things. I think number 1 was you got to do something about pretrial services. I think the other thing was to fight the prosecutor a little bit more. And I think the third thing was, dealing again with mental health issues. So I do support this and looking forward to seeing the plans. Thank you.
Commissioner Sauger, do you have anything? All right, very good.
Well, I will this, when you mentioned the county jail, there's places that I worked in there, Sheriff, that I wish would be tore down. Okay? Thank
They
you.
got logs in there.
Where's one was there, Barbie?
At that log cabin portion of it. All right. Motion's been made and supported. Any other speakers? Mr. Smith? Chairman Smith?
Yeah, I just do want to point out that, although we're moving this forward, we're still going to talk to Steve because I don't think, and this, Sheriff, this has nothing to do with the study and moving forward with it as far as we're concerned, but I'm sure that it was not my intention, nor was it anybody else's on this, on the appropriations ordinance to take new money from general fund while there was still money in the capital projects fund. So that's something that still needs to be worked out. But moving this forward, I just wanted to point that out. Steve's going to get back to us on this on Wednesday, but that's something I do want to point out that's still out there that I don't think is the proper way to go about it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you. All those in favor, please vote. 40, yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank
you
you.
for your team. Item B is the contract for the partnership and architect. With the separate motion to approve that contract and forward it to finance. I need a motion to support that. Commissioner forward it. Commissioner from Commissioner Leonetti, supported by Commissioner Toko. All those in favor, please vote. What? Yes, Commissioner Carabelli.
Thank you. I'd like to disclose to the board, about 10 years ago, the company I work for has worked with the architect in the past, though I have no financial interest and it won't influence my decision in any way. I'd like to disclose that to the board.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your disclosure. All those in favor, please vote.